Among all of the under 40 age respondents who said they at least infrequently drink wine, we asked them a very simple question. Are you drinking more wine than you were a year or two ago, or the same amount, or less? And you can see on this chart that among the top reasons for the people drinking less wine, and that's all that's being charted here, you can see that the top reason is, well, I prefer beer or spirits. But if you look all the way over at the right-hand side of this chart, which are the answers of just the people who are at least occasional wine drinkers, almost half of them say, the reason I'm drinking less wine now than I was a year or two ago is that the prices of the wines I like have gotten too high.
Welcome to the Wine2wine Vinitaly Business Forum 2025 Chicago edition, where global wine professionals share insights, strategies, and inspiration from this year's conference. Let's dive into today's session and explore the ideas shaping the future of wine.
Okay, once again, Wine2wine House is open.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I hope you all have been having a great time in Chicago. I know I have. To introduce myself, my name is Ryan Goydos. I'm the co-founder of a wine media brand called Super Vina Bros. I founded it with my twin brother, and we aim to make wine feel a little more approachable to a younger audience through videos, written media, as well as in-person events in both New York and abroad. Today, I have the privilege of introducing our next speaker, Mr. John Gillespie. John is the founder and CEO of Wine Opinions, the premier authority for wine market research. John recently led a fascinating survey on U.S. alcohol and beverage consumers between the ages of 21 and 39. And today he's going to share his findings with us to see how this generation, which so happens to be my generation, consumes wine. So without further ado, let's put our hands together for John.
Thanks, everyone, especially Ryan and especially Stevie for the invitation. At Wine Opinions, we're in our 21st year of doing wine market research. And normally we work for wine brands and wine trade associations. And every once in a while, we just take it upon ourselves to do some research just to try to figure out what's happening in the market and share that with the industry. And that's what we're going to talk about this afternoon. First of all, it's really a pleasure to be here with so many friends and colleagues. And I'm grateful to Stevie and the Vinitaly team for bringing such an abundance of delicious Italian wines for us to savor and discuss, because that's what it's all about for the trade. I know that it's no secret to you that wine sales in the US have taken a downward turn of late, and that the generational adoption of wine that we've enjoyed since baby boomers came of drinking age, all the way through Generation X and actually through the first wave, first half, if you will, of millennials, that trend has come to a flat stop. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to conduct the survey that I'm going to walk you through. The wine market downturn that we're in right now actually started in 2023, when US wine sales fell by 36 million cases compared to the previous year. In 2024, another 15 million cases were lost, which brought US wine sales to their lowest annual levels since 2011. That's where we are right now. You talk about going back to the future. We've gone back to the past. We're now selling as much wine in this country as we did in 2011. That's not progress. So with that in mind, Wine Opinions ran a survey of members of the Wine Opinions trade panel, first of all, asking them to compare their first half of this year's wine sales to the same period in 2024. So let's just go to the present, in other words, and see, all right, we've been going down for the last 2.5 years. Let's see if we've turned the corner. So we've asked our trade panel, distributors, retailers, and on-premise members of the wine trade, how they're doing in the first half of 2024. Well, the results were somewhat mixed. 53%, more than half of the distributors, retailers, and on-premise respondents that we queried reported declining sales in the first half of this year compared to the same period in 2024. So you can see that the decline is not over, it's in progress. So then, to better understand what's driving this decline in sales, we conducted in July a survey of 1,215 beverage alcohol drinkers between the ages of 21 to 39. in order to assess their usage and attitudes towards not just wine, but beer, spirits, and wine, all three. Now, I'm sure there are a few of you in the audience who know that at Wine Opinions, we have a national panel of wine drinkers that numbers a little bit more than 13,000. And when we're doing research for wine brands that are thinking about changing their packaging or branding a new wine and that kind of thing, we do a lot of research among members of our wine panel because they're mostly frequent wine drinkers. But for this study, that wouldn't do because those are already the people we have. Those are already the converted. So instead, we sourced respondents, about 1,200 and some odd in number, from the leading provider of survey respondents in the US. And our only requirement was that they be people under the age of 40 and that they drink beer, wine, or spirits either frequently or occasionally. So the numbers that I'm going to show you now, beginning with the slide that's up, is from an audience that is representative of the general population of beverage alcohol drinkers under age 40 in the US. And you can see here that most of the people who responded to this survey are occasional rather than frequent beverage alcohol drinkers. But many more of them were drinking beer than spirits, and more of them were drinking spirits than wine. In fact, among the wine drinkers that we surveyed here, those, among everyone we surveyed, more than 30% drank wine either infrequently or not at all. We then asked people who drank any one of these three types of beverage, either wine, beer, or spirits, to name their favorite. And here you can see, of course, beer trampled wine and spirits. There was also a no favorite category, so if you like two or more of these the same, then you were like a no favorite. But what you can see also is that, and again, no surprise, favor for beer trended towards males and those in their 30s, while wine and spirits both skewed female, but spirits skewed to people in their 20s, young drinkers in their 20s, whereas wine was basically equally divided between those in their 20s and those in their 30s. We then asked people, okay, looking at everything that you do at least occasionally consume, beer, wine, and spirits, let's talk about how you see the value for the price that you paid for each of these. Now, on this and every other chart that I'm going to show you, anything that's shaded in green, as you see here in that column that's of the total, that shaded in green means it's the highest percentage in the column. Anything that's shaded in tan, on the other hand, shows you that those numbers are significantly different from the row. So, for example, you can see the male and the 30-something skew to beer drinkers giving the highest value ratings to beer. You can see, for example, that spirits drinkers are statistically significantly more likely to give the highest ratings to spirits, wine drinkers likewise. That's the difference in the things that you'll see that are shaded here. Among all of the under 40 age respondents who said they at least infrequently drink wine, we asked them a very simple question. Are you drinking more wine than you were a year or two ago, or the same amount, or less? And you can see on this chart that among the top reasons for the people drinking less wine, and that's all that's being charted here, you can see that the top reason is, well, I prefer beer or spirits. But if you look all the way over at the right-hand side of this chart, which are the answers of just the people who are at least occasional wine drinkers, almost half of them say, the reason I'm drinking less wine now than I was a year or two ago is that the prices of the wines I like have gotten too high. Now, it's true also that there's a fairly significant percentage of beverage alcohol drinkers, both over 40 and under 40, who are trending towards cutting back on their overall beverage alcohol consumption. And you may recall that this summer, Gallup did its annual beverage alcohol survey of US beverage alcohol consumers. Now, this is a study, mind you, that they started in 1939, okay? Even I wasn't born then. So the Gallup study is the only truly repeated, consistent measure of beverage alcohol usage among Americans. It's the gold standard. And what Gallup found this year was that for the first time since 1939, more than half of the respondents to their survey agreed, because they do a survey, do you agree or disagree with the following statements? The statement that more than half, exactly 53% agreed to, was even moderate consumption of beverage alcohol is bad for your health. 53% of American beverage alcohol consumers believe that. So there's your headwind. We talk about headwinds and tailwinds. You want a headwind? There you go. What else is cutting into wine's share of the beverage alcohol market? Well, I'm flipping, this slide is back to the trade survey that we conducted in August, and we asked our folks in the trade to share with us how your sales of RTDs are going. And so we had, just in general, could be any kind of RTD. Could be a wine-based RTD, could be a spirits-based RTD, could be a THC or a CBD. So just RTDs, if you sell RTDs in general, how are they doing? Well, they're taking share from beer and from wine and from spirits. But who do you think they're taking the greatest share from? If I asked for a show of hands, how many think it's wine? Yeah. One of the things that we could see is that the people who say, yes, I drink, RTDs weekly or more often, that skews to wine drinkers. And so we just know that's a fact. So that's taking share. RTDs are taking share from both beer and from wine and from spirits, but they're really taking a disproportionate share from wine. So we asked, and I'm flipping back now to our trade survey, we asked people in the trade, okay, let's look at your last 12 months sales trends of either wines that are lower in alcohol or alcohol-free wines, or RTDs of the various kinds, wine-based RTDs or the THC-based RTDs or the CBD-based RTDs. And what you can see here is that sales are net up on RTDs across the board. So no matter what kind of RTD you're selling, if you're a retailer, say in Chicago, you're doing very well with those. They're all gaining share. But the ones that are really skyrocketing, if you look over at this column that says the THC-based RTDs, there's an 83% of the retailers selling those and the distributors selling those say their sales are up, versus only 6% saying their sales are in decline. That's a 77% net increase. Just think about that. When is the last time that your wine sales, if you're a retailer or a distributor, took a 77% sales increase in 1 year? And this brings me to one of the points that I'd like to make is, here we are, members of the beverage alcohol industry, so to speak. And we've always thought of that as the three obvious choices. If you're in beverage alcohol, there's beer, there's wine, and there's spirits. It's really simple. But then when we see what's happening with RTDs, especially the THC-based RTDs, maybe we should be thinking not just of that we're competitive with the beverage alcohol industry. Let's think about being in the adult beverage industry, because that includes the THC-based RTDs. This question is relevant because of the skyrocketing sales of THC RTDs. And I think of it as, now there's a fourth category. We've got beer, we've got wine, we've got spirits, and look at this assortment. And by the way, look at the packaging, if you will, for a moment. Does this look like any wine packaging that you've ever seen that is aimed at an under 40 market? I don't think so. Well, okay, there's one we could call out as an exception, isn't it? And it's been in the news lately, and it's Whiny Baby. Whiny Baby was bought by Gallo. Do you think those folks in Modesto have a pretty good idea of what they're going to do with that? I do. I think they know exactly what they're going to do with that. And it's going to look a heck of a lot more like what you see on the screen right now. I'm not saying that they're going to start producing Whiny Baby in tall 25-ounce cans like you see here, but it wouldn't be stupid of them to do it, would it? Okay, my favorite part. We come to the audience participation part of this, and this is the wrap-up. So this is where I'm going to conclude this presentation. Again, in our August survey of the Wine Opinions Trade Panel, we asked them to comment, open-ended comments, write a few words and tell us what you think on the significant number of consumers citing the rising prices of wine as the reason that they are cutting back on their wine consumption. We also asked the trade folks who took this survey, also just add your own thoughts. We want to hear from you. What happened was there were three kind of categories of open-ended responses that we got from our trade panel, and they were these. First of all, they agreed with consumers that wine prices have gotten too high. Secondly, they expressed the belief that wine prices are a factor in consumers choosing other adult beverages. And thirdly, that wine prices are barriers for younger consumers. So here comes the audience participation part. I'm going to read you 3 comments in the category of wine prices are too high, and then we're going to have a show of hands on whether you agree or disagree with the comments. Here they are. Consumers are right, wine pricing is too high. That's one. Wine prices are way too high and getting higher. That was another comment. Here's the third one. Wines are horribly overpriced, especially in the on-premise segment, where average wine is priced higher than cocktails or beer. Okay, in the audience, how many agree in general with these 3 statements? Raise your hand if you agree. A little less than half. If you disagree, raise your hand. Oh, only a couple. If you have no opinion, raise your hand. One honest person has no opinion. That's great. Okay, so that was one thing from the trade survey. Here's another one, talking about alternative beverage choices. These are typical responses that we got. The more prices go up, people will pivot to beer, seltzers, and RTD cocktails. Another typical comment, cheap wine sales have plummeted because of canned cocktails. And here's a third member of the trade weighing in. People are looking for an alternative option that will still give them a buzz without breaking the bank. Alternative beverage choices, a real thing. How many of you agree with that? Raise your hands if you agree. Okay, about the same as with the first. How many disagree? Only a couple, 3, 4. And how many not certain? See, no one wants to raise their hand and say, geez, I don't know, right? Because we're all supposed to be smart people. And then here's the last category of people that we asked to comment on, which was the barriers to bringing in younger consumers. First comment, in the push to premiumize, and they put it in air quotes, the industry has locked out new and aspiring drinkers. How many people agree with that? That's as many as the first one. Secondly, there's a lot of poorly made wine in the under 15 range. It's hard to get new drinkers to enter a category with low quality options in that range. How many agree with that statement? Even more. Last statement. There should still be an abundance of very good wine under 20, and there's just not anymore. And that's keeping the entry buyer out of the market. How many agree? A lot. Well, it's very clear that we face a challenge in rebuilding consumer perceptions of wine. So with the time remaining, I'd be happy to take either your questions or your comments on what you see as the market challenges we face. So anybody who wants to comment, please just raise your hand. And I don't know if we can go around. We'll go around with a mic so that everyone can be heard. So first, there's a lady in the second row right here with her hand up.
So the alternative category, with people turning to that, I don't believe it's because of price. Those actually cost more than most RTDs. It's because of the health aspect of it. People are turning to that because they want the buzz without the hangover. And when it comes to like low quality wine, that's more likely to make you feel crappy the next day. And people are starting to realize that.
The general point is that it's not so much price of wine. Is that correct? Okay, because that could certainly be. I mean, I don't think we know the answer to that yet. But I think that's well worth considering. It may not be just price. It may be, new kid on the block alternatives, which, would not be surprising. There's a gentleman in the back here.
So this decline in wine is happening internationally. But internationally, people don't have access to cannabis or THC drinks. And internationally, people do have access to better priced wines in the on-premise or in the under $20. So do you think there might be something else going on as well?
Do you mean something else besides the incursion of RTDs in general and THC RTDs in particular?
Yeah, because we're seeing these same patterns in markets that don't have THC or cannabis drinks.
We know that wine prices by themselves are a deterrent, especially to under 40 wine consumers. Forget what else they may be trying or occasionally indulging in. So it isn't just that there's a new kid on the block in terms of THC RTDs, and that's what our problem is, but it's an aggravating issue. The main problem, from what we learned in July, was its prices. Or James Carville once said, it's the economy, stupid, right? That's where we are. That's a perception. I'm not saying that they're right about that. I'm just saying that we asked 1,200 of them to tell us why they weren't drinking wine as often, and that's what they said.
Starting from my experience with a wine store, do you think that it's possible that over-communication about wines makes people uncomfortable, that they feel judged in buying a product, that they will think maybe I'm not choosing the right product, and that all the sommelier communication makes people not sure what they're buying, so they are not sure they're going to be able to share what they're buying with their family or friends?
When you say over-communicated, do you mean that it's all like people are required to learn wine speak before they can even buy their first bottle, that kind of thing, or do you mean it differently?
I mean it as you say it, and also that they feel to be judged in the way because they don't know how to talk about this wine with a friend. It's easy to buy a beer and share it. It's not easy to buy a bottle of wine and share it as easily.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, I would agree with that for sure. I think that in my experience, I find people that, just anecdotally, people feel very intimidated to walk into a store because they feel that they need to have some sort of expectation of what, Pinot Noir is or what Sangiovese is or something, right? So I think it's on wine educators as well as different media platforms to, make wine feel a little less intimidating, and I think I would agree with you. I think that definitely contributes to maybe some declining wine sales where people feel like they don't, know what they're buying, so they're just going to avoid it all. So I would agree with that.
I agree also that there's an intimidation factor, and there always has been. But we in the industry have been working so hard to make wine less intimidating and more understandable. Now, I'm not saying that we've done a bang-up job of it, but I know that years ago we saw that as a barrier, and we've all been kind of working on that. But I wonder sometimes if maybe and this may sound a little stupid, but maybe one of the things that would help the wine industry is if we brought wine snobbery back. Oh, young person, you just don't, we'd love to help you here, but you just you're not worldly enough. Please come back when you've been to Europe for a week and, done things that you never dreamt were possible. And then we'll sell you a bottle of wine. But don't bother us with your silly question. You see what I'm saying? I'm exaggerating. But, back when baby boomers were coming into wine, that worked. It was an obstacle for baby boomers. Oh, I see. I need to know more in order to do this, to be accepted as someone who does this. And so all of we studious baby boomers accepting a challenge like that got good at it and loved wine and have been loving wine ever since. So I'm pressing this, I'm exaggerating to kind of make a point, but it's something to consider. Maybe the lack of wine snobbery is in fact holding us back. I don't know.
I personally would disagree with that. I think that wine snobbery really put my brother and I off of it for a long time, thinking that the only wines that exist in the world are wines that belong at white tablecloth dinner parties, and I think that for a majority of wine consumers that I associate myself with, that was their barrier to entry until they found other channels like media companies that talked about wine in a cool way. That's what got their interest sparked again. Yeah. So I think that I would definitely zag on that.
Instead of zig.
Okay. Exactly.
I have a quick question.
Oh.
Well, Ryan, I agree with you on that. I'm not quite sure the wine snobbery would help us in this situation. I think that the industry is reacting, but I don't think we're reacting fast enough. I think if younger people saw that the industry was reacting a little bit, I feel like it's a little stagnant, so that's why they're kind of going away from wine even more, younger audience, I think. So that's why you see a lot of niches, or I think of the trendy wine bars in New York, that's where everybody gathers because that's their audience and they feel understood from the industry when they are in those places. So I think that's just interesting to see all the different wine shops that have and bars that have opened up specifically in New York. But I had a question. I was wondering if there was a survey that you did for RTDs based on the base beverage of it. So if it's malt, if it's tequila, if it's vodka, if it's wine. Because I'm wondering from a convenience standpoint, you just go to the bar, you get a can, and you can open it, not on the street, but technically if you wanted, you could, and you can bring it to the park. Is it a convenience thing that if you get a bottle of wine, you forget the bottle opener, you can't open it, it becomes I wonder if that's also something that affects it, and what the difference between wine sales and RTDs that are wine-based would be. I wonder where the wine-based RTDs would fall in the RTD category.
You raise a couple of very interesting points. Let me say this about one of them. Even though the sales increases for RTDs that are THC infused was the highest, the net sales increase of wine-based RTDs was over 50%. There are so few wine-based RTDs on the market. The only two that really come to my mind are Stella Rosa and Barefoot. Okay, I know there are a couple of more, but there just aren't many of them. And yet, those products, those wine-based RTDs, are way outperforming regular wine on the shelf, way outperforming. So why more producers are not jumping into the wine-based RTD business is a mystery to me. And I will go back to, and you'll be able to say you heard it here first, I will go back to, why did Gallo buy Whiny Baby? It is so obvious that it is a Gen Z play, pure. It is obvious to me that the smart people, and there's a lot of smart people in Modesto, have got something in mind for that brand with exactly this issue in mind of single serve, single-use occasion beverage that is aimed at people under 40. And I will be, 6 months from now, I could be all wrong about this, but let's wait and see what they do with Whiny Baby, because I think there's something afoot there.
Just on the idea of wine snobbery and using that to draw in a new audience, I'm not going to go with you 100%, but I do think that the wine industry, any number of times, I remember when I first joined and there was all this enthusiasm about marketing wine to millennials, and the attempts to simplify wine and get rid of the snobbery became dumbing wine down. I think that's what we need to avoid above all. Wine is complex. The beauty of wine is its complexity. Why are we bending over backwards to try to behave like beer? In its way has been building towards having the complexity that wine has, to recognize our strengths and present them. I think, Ryan, what you're doing, present that complexity in a way that people can relate to, but people are drawn to the complexity of wine. I don't think it needs to be simplified out. That would be a real shame.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think there's a lot of nuances to wine that make it so appealing to some of our audience that we have. People just are fascinated by a bunch of different grapes of a certain region and the history behind it, and learning about a culture through the lens of wine. So I think that having that and catering to the strengths of wine in that way is something I completely agree with.
Okay, Stevie.
Okay, let's give it up for John and Ryan. Thank you so much.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, cin cin.